Tonight, a fragile peace is holding between Israel and Hezbollah, but will it last? In Lebanon, many of the 1.2 million people displaced by war have rushed back to their homes, but for some, there's little left but rubble. While in northern Israel, our international correspondent Alex Rossi encounters a reluctance to return.
These places are still pretty much deserted, most people still staying away. There's a great deal of apprehension about what comes next.
We've had 15 years of quiet, and now we had a war.
Also tonight, the FBI says Team Trump have been the target of bomb threats. And we go inside the mind of Elon Musk. Martha Kellner asks the billionaire's father about their shared views on reproduction and ask how it might shape US policy.
Is he talking about eugenics there?
I wouldn't call it eugenics as such, but every nation has practiced a certain form of survival of the fittest.
Plus, the sister of a dual British citizen detained in Egypt on her fears for his life and those of her mother, who's 60 days into a hunger strike. And I speak to the director of the film Rust about continuing with his film after the death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. I want to start the programme tonight with a word that sadly we very rarely use on this programme, and that word is peace. Tonight, a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah is holding. For how long? Well, that is another matter. But for now, there is peace. And because of that, we've seen pictures like these. Huge numbers heading to their homes in Lebanon. More than 1.2 million people were displaced by this conflict. The question is, what are they going back to? Some will return to rubble. Almost 14 months of conflict have transformed their lives. More than 3,500 people in Lebanon died in Israeli fire. Hezbollah strikes have killed 45 Israeli civilians. At times, this regional conflict threatened to explode into something much bigger. Those shocking pager attacks, an Israeli ground incursion, the assassination of Hezbollah's leader, and 2 direct attacks by Iran against Israel seem to be pushing us to the brink. Now we have a ceasefire, a deal brokered by the United States and France being hailed as a victory for diplomacy. And yet, it is only a partial victory. After all, nothing has changed in Gaza. The question now is whether this will be a springboard towards peace there. Joe Biden says he will now push for a breakthrough, but ultimately it may not be up to him. It could instead be up to this man, Donald Trump. We'll look at how his presidency might change the dynamic in the Middle East. But we start with the ceasefire, and this report from our international correspondent, Alex Rossi.
Just hours after the ceasefire began in Lebanon and the displaced had taken to the roads with their possessions to head back to their villages in the south of the country. But despite the jubilation, much has been destroyed, and it will take years to rebuild.
We left our house 63 days ago, almost in the first days that Dahya started getting bombarded. It was very hard on us. It's not easy at all.
The house has been damaged. We will go back and fix it, and we are used to this. We lost our house in the village down south, and now here.
The Israeli military struck targets right up to the moment in the early hours of the morning when the ceasefire took hold. Acrid smoke from the blasts still hung over the capital, Beirut. Lebanon's caretaker government is hoping the truce can be maintained. The nation's army will be deployed to the south to keep the peace.
Today is a new day where we hope it carries with it peace and stability. On this day, the 1,000-mile journey begins in rebuilding what was destroyed and completing the strengthening of the role of legitimate institutions.
Across the border in northern Israel, there is unease and questions over whether the agreement will hold. It is very, very quiet after months of fighting. There's no sound of artillery or rocket fire, but these places are still pretty much deserted. Most people still staying away. There's a great deal of apprehension about what comes next. You're very close here indeed.
Extremely close. If you actually look through the trees, you can see a Lebanese village there.
Barry Prague, a resident of Kibbutz Daphne, says many of his neighbours are still too worried to return.
We've got a new area development there. People have bought houses and they said, wait, are we so close to the border? Because we've had 15 years of quiet. And now we had a war, which is the worst war we've ever had.
Under the deal, Hezbollah will move its heavy weapons north of the Litani River, whilst Israeli troops will withdraw from southern Lebanon entirely. But Israel is making clear it reserves the right to attack if there are breaches to the agreement. The accord does nothing, though, to stop the fighting in Gaza, where there's been no let-up in the violence. The people here feel abandoned.
Of course, news of the ceasefire in Lebanon is positive, for its people and for the government. And the people of Gaza dream of having the same, because they too deserve to experience that.
The truce between Israel and Hezbollah remains delicate. There is much that could still go wrong. The hope is that the initial 60-day ceasefire will be extended and will eventually lead to a broader regional peace. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Northern Israel.
Peace agreed then, but under what terms? Well, our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, has been looking at the details of the deal. Let's have a look.
Hezbollah and Israel have been at war since Hezbollah attacked Israel the day after October the 7th. Israel invaded southern Lebanon on the 1st of October this year. By Tuesday this week, Israeli troops had reached all the way to the Litani River for the first time since hostilities began. They've now agreed a ceasefire. Under its terms, over the next 60 days, Israeli forces should fully withdraw from southern Lebanon, and Hezbollah must move what remains of its forces north of the Litani River. Then Lebanese forces, 5,000 troops, will move in to ensure Hezbollah stays out of the area between the border and the Litani River. America and France will oversee the ceasefire along with a UN peacekeeping force. Thousands of Lebanese civilians have been returning to their homes in the south all day. But Israel has now declared a curfew, barring any more from doing so. It is afraid that Hezbollah could redeploy in the south by hiding among the civilians returning. Both sides are now counting the cost. Israel's campaign in Lebanon has been absolutely devastating, most of all in the south. As you can see here on the map, villages and towns across a huge area have been damaged from the south to Beirut and right up to the Bekaa Valley. The World Bank is estimating the economic impact of the war at almost £7 billion. As they return home, Lebanese civilians are finding massive destruction. This is what the people of the border town of Bint Jbeil have been going home to today. In the town of Alta al-Sha'ab, residents tore down an Israeli flag, which they found on their water tower. And some have returned to Israeli armour, still deployed on their streets, like this Israeli Merkava tank in the village of Kayam. On the other side of the border, Israelis will want to go back to their homes too. 60,000 were evacuated from the north of Israel after October the 7th. They will want to be sure that Hezbollah attacks on the ground and in the air have stopped for good. And that will be one key test if this ceasefire has any chance of holding.
Dominic Waghorn there. Well, let's go straight to our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, who joins us now from Jerusalem. Alex, good to see you. I mean, Hezbollah, as we've been reporting for the past few weeks, has been decapitated, and they emerge from this shaken from top to bottom. But this ceasefire agreement also remains incredibly fragile.
Yeah, it is a very delicate ceasefire that is in place. Initially, of course, for 2 months, 60 days, and people have been pointing out here that much could go wrong in that time. And the reason they point this out is because of the architecture of the agreement. If you actually look at it closely, it's very similar to what we saw ending the war in 2006, United Nations Resolution 1701. It follows the contours of that resolution. It was never fully implemented at the time, and obviously it has broken down over the last 15 years. But that really kind of underpins this whole agreement. What we're going to see is the Lebanese military go into southern Lebanon. UNIFIL, the UN peacekeeping force, is also going to be there as well, and they are going to try and maintain or try and see that the agreement is upheld by both sides. There are some tweaks, though. There are some differences this time, Yalda. We're going to see an international monitoring committee led by the United States, which is going to be like a kind of referee to check for any breaches. And I think the other significant factor in all of this, and we heard Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday when he appeared on national television to sell this to the Israeli public, he says that Israel reserves the right to attack militarily with great aggression if it sees any breaches. And he has made that commitment, he says, to the Israeli people that they won't allow another situation to emerge as it did in 2006, where you saw Hezbollah rearm and lodge itself on the border. But that said, of course, it is very, very fragile indeed. I was in the northern part of Israel today, speaking to people, taking the temperature. Many people, we were told, are still not convinced that it is safe to return home because they fear that this ceasefire agreement could break down. That said, there is cause for optimism as well, as you have pointed out. Hezbollah has been severely degraded, its leadership decapitated, including its leader, Hassan Nasrallah. It will want to go away and lick its wounds and just hope for survival. And from the Israeli point of view, they say now the focus is on Iran. But in all of this, of course, the ceasefire in Gaza still remains elusive, which could keep things going in the rest of the region. And there is no sign, really, that that ceasefire is going to come anytime soon.
Alex, of course, the United States played a crucial role here and has attempted to, since the beginning of this conflict that began between Hezbollah and Israel over the past couple of months, to try and bring them both to the negotiating table. But so has France. So, the question is, France has managed to get its ceasefire, but on the other hand, has it sort of almost given Benjamin Netanyahu a get-out-of-jail card?
Well, that will certainly be the accusation that is made against the French and is going to be made against President Macron. People will be looking very closely at this. Why did this deal suddenly come to fruition? And you're, of course, referring to the International Criminal Court arrest warrants for Yoav Gallant, the Defence Minister, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, initially, when that was announced on Friday, the French made it quite clear that they would fulfil their obligations under that agreement, and if that would mean, of course, if the Prime Minister Netanyahu or Yoav Gallant touched their feet on French soil, they would be arrested. But now we're hearing this statement from the French ministry, which seems to be using that very law to say, actually, they would be exempt. We had this statement from the Foreign Ministry saying a state cannot be held to act in a way that's incompatible with its obligations in terms of international law with regard to immunities granted to states which are not party to the ICC. And of course, Israel is not party to the ICC. And effectively, what it's saying is, and it goes on, such immunities apply to Prime Minister Netanyahu and other ministers in question, viz. Yoav Gallant, the defence minister. So they are effectively saying that as far as they are concerned, as far as the French are concerned, this ICC warrant for the arrest of Prime Minister Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant does not hold water as far as the French are concerned. But of course, by doing so, they are saying that they are, they won't necessarily pay their dues to a treaty that they are fully signed up to.
Alex, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there from Jerusalem. Now, the 60-day ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah follows more than a year of fighting, which escalated in the last 2 months following the killing of Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah in an Israeli airstrike on Beirut. Throughout our coverage, I've been in Beirut to witness the dramatic events as they unfolded. Here's a reminder of what's happened during 14 months of war. If you ask anyone in the region, the worst that could happen, one answer would be the violence spreading beyond Israel, Iran and Gaza. Tensions between Israel and Hezbollah continue to ratchet up. Thousands of pages were remotely detonated across Lebanon and in Syria. This afternoon, hundreds of walkie-talkies exploded, 14 deaths, 400 injuries. Were these bold attacks a prelude to something even worse? What does this mean for Hezbollah and regional tensions? There's now a palpable sense of panic and real fear here. No one knows what will happen next. In the last couple of hours, the Israeli Defense Force announced that the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, was killed in an airstrike, multiple airstrikes overnight. You're looking at live pictures of Beirut at the moment. Late last night, Israel began what it called a targeted ground operation inside southern Lebanon with raids on Hezbollah targets. We can see and hear the sirens in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Let's just listen into what's happening in Jerusalem right now. We begin tonight with the ceasefire agreement between Hezbollah and Israel, which is due to come into effect within hours. Hezbollah have backed it, and according to the US, Israel has too. A dramatic few months there in Lebanon, and as Alex Rossi was saying there, now a very delicate and fragile ceasefire. We're not even 24 hours into it at the moment, but we will be continuing to watch all of the developments. And the ceasefire and Lebanon's rebuilding job was something Richard Engel and I discussed on this week's episode of the World Podcast, which is out now. Just take a listen. What's tragic about Lebanon is they're such an extraordinary people. They have so much potential. What blew my mind is in 2006, the conflict with Israel lasted about a month and they had about 1,000 people dead. And this has just gone on and on and on and had the potential to really escalate. As you say, the Israelis are wrapping things up. They're done with, the operations in Lebanon.
Sure, the weapons stop, but then Hezbollah has to pull out from the south. People need to go back in. The army needs to go back in. I think we'll see the scale of the devastation, and it will give us a glimpse of what Gaza is like, because some of those border towns right along the Israeli border, which got occupied by Israeli troops, have been really flattened. So I think we'll start to see the impacts of the war, because a lot of our coverage has been based. I was in Tyre, I was in Beirut, we were there together, but we couldn't really get to some of those areas right on the Israel-Lebanon border because they were being so badly pummeled.
That was the World Podcast, and you can get that wherever you get your podcast. Now, in Lebanon, the cost of damage to housing alone is estimated at around £2.2 billion. How will the country recover? Well, Lebanon's Minister of Economy and Trade, Amin Salam, joins me now from Beirut. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme, Minister. We've been speaking a lot. We spoke a lot in Beirut when the conflict there began. I just want to get your reaction to the last 24 hours, 48 hours, where we've now seen this ceasefire coming to effect. It's less than 24 hours old. Do you think it's going to hold?
Yes, good evening, Yalda. It's always good to catch up. Things have changed drastically since our last interview in Beirut. Today, we're looking at a ceasefire that really brought some happiness to Lebanon, brought some happiness to us as a government, at least to stop the bleeding, to stop the chaos, to stop the disaster. However, we're looking at major losses. Definitely since we spoke last, the numbers have went drastically up, talking about the negative effects on the economy, the cost of rebuilding what has been damaged, particularly that Beirut has been hit very hard since we spoke last. And that was not the case when you guys were still covering in Lebanon.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get to, the rebuilding and what the country and the government faces. But just on the ceasefire itself, I mean, what's at stake if Hezbollah doesn't actually stick to the deal of and the agreement with Israel at this point?
Look, the deal is very clear. President Biden was very clear. He said we're looking at a long-lasting or permanent. He used the word permanent when he said we are looking for that to be a permanent ceasefire, because this ceasefire has been negotiated thoroughly. It's been negotiated particularly with the Speaker of the House in Lebanon and his team, who were working very closely with Hezbollah as well to get to this understanding. So today, this means that Lebanon is in front of an opportunity to save the country, to save what is left of Lebanon, to be able to recover and come back. If this ceasefire is to fail, I think we will be taking Lebanon to a very, very dangerous, unknown territory of escalation, of bringing back the war to the table, and further devastation, which would be, I think, a place very hard from Lebanon to recover from, or even to find allies around the world to fix.
Yeah, absolutely. Minister, you spoke there about the devastation. We've spoken a lot about the families who will be going back to their homes, but will be returning to the rubble. Will Lebanon be able to now rebuild and recover? And what assistance are you looking from the international community now?
Well, Yalda, this is all part of really the success of the ceasefire. It is part, I would say, of the test period that we have to show to the world that we are committed, we want Lebanon to be saved. I'm not saying that from a perspective just to throw ourselves in the international community, say, we're just here to do whatever you want, please save us. No, I'm saying that as Minister of Economy today, facing facts, facing numbers, facing a very scary reality of a country that will face major economic and social meltdown if we don't seek international aid based on, first of all, complying with this ceasefire, complying with 1701, executing 1701, and showing real reforms in Lebanon. Otherwise, nobody from the international community, Yalda, is willing to help Lebanon. It has been made very clear that everyone, including the Arab nations, want to help Lebanon, but Lebanon needs to take a firm stand as a people and as a government that they want to bring back this country to the good days. They want to bring back Lebanon to where it needs to be.
Minister, is this the moment, for the first time in more than 40 years, that Lebanon's army will be the only armed actor in the country?
Yes, it is a moment. It is a moment of truth. It's a moment that all our generations, including my generation, since the day we were born, we dreamt of. We always wanted the Lebanese army to have full sovereignty over Lebanon, because I can tell you, Yalda, since the day I was born, I'm going almost over 4 decades, we always had Lebanon in a very complicated place where there is a lot of militias. Most of it was a result of the Arab-Israeli struggle, and we never had stability with the Lebanese army since the day I was born, with authority all over the country. This for us is a moment of dream come true, and I say that wholeheartedly. We want to see that day, because that's the only time where we will be recognized as a sovereign state. We will be helped and dealt with as a sovereign state and respected as a sovereign state by all nations in the world.
Minister, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Yalda.
Well, in contrast to the truce now in place in Lebanon, the conflict in Gaza goes on. Aid agencies are warning of famine, with hundreds of thousands sheltering in tent camps. Well, here with me now is Carl Sco, the Deputy Executive Director of the World Food Programme. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. We can speak a little bit about Lebanon after you heard what the Minister said. I mean, it is a devastating situation there for so many who will have to rebuild their homes, but they will also face food insecurity.
Yeah, we were ready when the war broke out and stepped up and have supported some 200,000 people on a daily basis, mainly in the shelters. We are now, of course, re-gearing some of that support. So we have already been delivering in the south, trying to reach the thousands that have been stuck there now for several weeks, but also assisting people, as we've seen from the pictures, who are on the roads moving back as they actually move along the roads. And thirdly, we need to now see how we can assist them in the recovery, including getting farmers back on their land so that people can begin to sustain themselves and that Lebanon can return to becoming self-sufficient when it comes to food. But it is, of course, a welcome moment nonetheless.
Given the scale of the destruction, though, do you feel this is going to be an uphill battle?
No, definitely. I mean, Lebanon was already in a very difficult position before this war. We were assisting over 1 million vulnerable Lebanese already before the war, and on top of that, the Syrian refugees in the country. And so already it was a very fragile situation, and this is, of course, added on top of that crisis. So it is a long road ahead, but I think we welcome this ceasefire, and we are going to do what we can also to assist the people as they return, but indeed important to also continue to support overall development of Lebanon and the stability going forward.
Let's turn our attention to Gaza, because, of course, I've spoken to the WFP chief as well, Cindy McCain, who's spoken about famine in Gaza, the concerns about what's happening in Gaza. Just give us an assessment of where the programs are now and how worried you are about the developments there.
We're extremely worried. I mean, we are heading towards famine again. In June, July, we had somewhat managed to stabilize the situation. There was access to basic food commodities, but over the past 6 to 8 weeks, we've seen a dramatic deterioration of the situation. So in the north, it's due to the resumption of the fighting and the evacuation orders in large parts of the north. In the south, it's really due to a complete breakdown of law and order. I mean, we had pockets of that kind of vacuum, over the past months, but right now it's spreading throughout the south. And so, the first 6 months of this war, we had problems of getting to the border, getting across the border. That's not as much of a problem now. For us, it's really...
The Israelis are allowing access now.
Yes, and the problem now is really moving around inside Gaza and doing distributions in an orderly and safe way.
When you say law and order, do you mean the criminal gangs that are operating there as well and hijacking food supplies, for example?
That is indeed an increasing problem. And so in the past, we had challenges with gangs as we traveled from Kerem Shalom, the main opening, into our warehouses. Now that's spread throughout, so it's not only in that area around Kerem Shalom. So we have challenges around our warehouses. We have challenges. For the first time last week, we actually were looted also on our way for distribution, and that has not happened before. So it's a completely new scenario. I think I want to underline that. I mean, it's hard to find new words, really, when we talk about Gaza, but we are in a new situation with this complete meltdown of any kind of order.
We only have about a minute left, but I wanted to ask you about Sudan, because the situation there is also increasingly desperate.
I mean, it's the largest humanitarian crisis. 1.5 million people in starvation and famine declared in Darfur. The first famine in the past 8 years, the third time only in the past 25 years. So it's dramatic, and this is happening very much under the radar. We have now launched a surge in the past couple of weeks because the road conditions are better since the rains have ceased. We've also gotten some new permissions from the government to move around. And we are using our own trucks that are clearly marked as UN, and we are making some headway. We, on Friday, for the first time in many weeks, delivered assistance to this IDP camp in Darfur, Zamzam, where famine had been declared. So there is some progress, but it's far from enough. And the international community really needs to step up for Sudan.
Yeah, a number of crises there right across
the list is longer.
Yeah, absolutely. Carl, thank you very much for joining us here.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you.
You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come on the programme, the FBI investigates bomb threats against a number of Trump's top team. And the Musk effect. How much will the views of the world's richest man influence Trump's second presidency? We hear from Elon Musk's father.
First Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you. How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Conor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute.
We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death.
Scotland has a shameful record, worse than England, the worst in Europe. So why not just say you've failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder.
Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news.
It's over, isn't it?
The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster.
This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country.
A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Ennis after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
Sky News. The full story first.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. Let's turn to the United States now, where the FBI has confirmed that several of Donald Trump's cabinet nominees have been targeted with bomb threats. Well, let's speak now to our US correspondent, James Matthews, who joins us live from Washington. And James, we're talking about a number of cabinet nominees here who have been threatened.
That's right, Yalda. Officials and cabinet nominees targeted in these bomb threats and instances of so-called swatting, because swatting, as in SWAT teams, that's what turns up when this happens. What happens is that somebody phones up the emergency services, says there is a life-threatening situation taking place at a particular address, and law enforcement is sent to investigate, often including SWAT teams. So that can be dangerous and has proved fatal in the past. So what's been happening is that somebody is issuing threats against these individuals, some bomb threats and some calls to the emergency services. They include Elise Stefanik, Donald Trump's pick for to be UN Secretary General. She was driving home with her 3-year-old child when she was informed of a bomb threat made to her residence. Matt Gaetz is another one, Donald Trump's original pick for Attorney General until he pulled out. Again, that was a bomb threat. Sniffer dogs and bomb squad were sent to his residence, but nothing was found. So the authorities are taking these very seriously, although no credible or physical threat has been established. But let me read you a statement by the FBI. They say this: the FBI is aware of numerous bomb threats and swatting incidents targeting incoming administration nominees and appointees. We are working with law enforcement partners. We take all potential threats seriously and, as always, encourage members of the public to immediately report anything they consider suspicious to law enforcement. So there you go, Yalda. No harm done at this stage, but it is being taken seriously. I can tell you that Donald Trump and the Vice President-elect, J.D. Vance, they're not included. They haven't been a target in this latest episode.
James, thank you as always. And, you and I have talked for a long time about the assassination attempts on Donald Trump. So there are these ongoing threats, but as you say, on this occasion, not on Donald Trump or J.D. Vance. Thanks so much for bringing us up to date. Well, as we edge closer to President Trump's second term in office, his growing friendship with Elon Musk is coming under the spotlight. It's clear the world's richest man has the president's ear. But how much will his opinions shape decision-making in the White House? Sky News has spoken to Elon Musk's father, Errol, about his son's concerns about population decline and whether that might influence future policy on family and fertilization. He was speaking to our US correspondent, Martha Kellner.
Is the only reason we can now send American astronauts into space.
Their alliance shaped the 2024 election, a bond that has only deepened since. But how can Elon Musk's views influence Donald Trump's policy? The cause closest to his heart is pronatalism, a pro-birth ideology in which reproduction is the key goal of humanity. Musk regularly posts on social media fears about population decline bordering on obsession. The frequency of these posts has increased in recent months. Population collapse is coming, he writes. Earth is almost empty of humans. Instead of teaching fear of pregnancy, we should teach fear of childlessness. Musk has 11 children by 3 different women. Some have spent time with him at Trump's Florida mansion. But few understand the origin of his views better than his own father, Errol Musk.
Elon doesn't try to push his opinion across, but he will have an opinion.
Errol has 7 children himself, ranging in age from Elon at 53 to his youngest daughter, who is 5. He's also a pronatalist.
We're not here to enjoy boating or flying or, skiing or kite surfing or something. We're here to continue being here.
Certain countries, like the US, do have ageing populations. But my conversation with Errol also reveals views which veer towards selective breeding.
Elon once told a biographer, if each successive generation of smart people has fewer kids, then that's probably bad. Is he talking about eugenics there?
I wouldn't call it eugenics as such, but every nation has practiced a certain form of survival of the fittest. One need only go to England and go to Cheltenham area, the horse breeding area, and say, look, we're not going to breed the horses anymore by any form of standard. I've got a few old horses I found in Nigeria, and we're going to just mix them with your racehorses. They'll say, no.
A more sanitised version of pro-family politics took centre stage on the campaign trail.
I consider myself to be the father of fertilisation.
The president-elect vowing to make in vitro fertilisation free to anyone who needs it.
We restore our embryos, we store sperm and we store oocytes.
California is the world's fertility capital.
We are busy.
I'm invited into a leading IVF clinic in LA, where they're expecting a big boost in business.
Trump, for better or for worse, tends to keep his word. And And the sort of the poo-pooing of what he was saying, I think, has vanished because they're realizing that it's probably going to happen. So all the fertility centers are gearing up for a huge surge.
Patients at this clinic can choose not only the gender of their baby, but their eye colour too. It's Silicon Valley meets family planning.
How big a part is Elon Musk going to play in the future of IVF?
Musk is a technocrat. He's an intellectual genius in multiple areas, and everything he touches seems to turn to gold. There's not much that evolves as quickly as Musk's technology, but IVF has done that, and I think he's going to find that very attractive.
Musk has invested millions in fertility research, but he's navigating his own complicated family life. In the hills outside Austin, Texas, there are rumours he's bought a compound to house some of his children and their mothers together. Musk denies this is true, but soon he could be helping to design family policy across this country. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Los Angeles.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, the family of a man imprisoned in Egypt appealed to the Foreign Secretary for help. I'll speak to Alaa Abd El Fattah's sister next.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Well, Welcome back to the programme. The family of a British-Egyptian man detained in Egypt have met today with the Foreign Secretary to push for his release. Alaa Abd El Fattah, a pro-democracy writer, has been in jail since September 2019. He was supposed to be freed this September after completing a 5-year sentence for allegedly spreading false news. But authorities say his first 2 years in detention before trial weren't included in his sentence. His mother, Leila Souef, has been on a hunger strike since the day he was due to be released. That's now 60 days. Today, she told David Lammy she's determined to continue until her son is free.
He listened to me. I hope my message got through. My main message was that I'm on hunger strike. I'm not about to break my hunger strike until Alaa is released.
That was Alaa's mother, and Alaa's sister, Sana, is here with me. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. I've been tracking this story. I've spoken to other members of your family over the years, but it's quite extraordinary to see your mum on this hunger strike. She's become quite frail and lost a lot of weight, obviously, as a result.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, she's very resilient, and if you ask her, she's going to say, I'm doing all right. And I trust her resilience, but I don't think we can take her, like the resilience of her body for granted. She's 68 years old. I've been reading about hunger strikes, and I've read online that people die, like younger and healthier people die at like after losing 40% of their original body weight. My mom has lost so far around 16 to 17%. And again, these statistics are for younger people. She's 68. But I also trust her resilience, and yeah, she's my mom, so I have hope that she will succeed in this.
Yeah, I can see, I mean, how difficult this is for you to talk about, the situation of your brother. You were expecting him to be released and potentially home in September. We're now in November, and now the authorities in Egypt are saying the first 2 years he served were not part of this sentence that he's supposed to be serving.
Yeah, and this is like totally unlawful even by Egyptian law, and they're not even claiming, like, what were these 2 years for? They're not claiming there is another crime. Sadly, a part of me was worried that this would happen because it has happened with other Egyptian political prisoners. And this is where my frustration at the British government comes from, because we have been warning that this is a possibility, so that the British government needs to press and say, you know, this is our citizen, you have to abide by your own laws.
And they haven't.
I don't think they realized the seriousness until like 3 days prior to the date. I also heard from Alicia Kearns, she's an MP. I also realized later that some MPs had actually wrote to the Foreign Office prior to the date, a month prior to the date, also flagging it to them. I think they wasted this opportunity, but we can still save the situation, and I think the British government is fully capable of getting Alaa to Brighton.
You met with the Foreign Secretary, your family met with the Foreign Secretary today. Were you comforted by what you were hearing?
It's confusing. It was a frank conversation, finally, but it felt a bit late. I hope it's not too late. Like, I finally felt heard. He gave us time, but we didn't. I don't have anything tangible. I don't have any promises. I'm going back to see my brother. I'm flying back to Cairo on Friday. I'm going to see Alaa on Saturday. I don't even know what to tell him because I don't have anything tangible. We have the attention of the Foreign Secretary, but...
He was quite vocal when you know, he was criticising the previous Foreign Secretary for not doing enough.
Yes, he was vocal, and he was very specific about certain leverages that the British government could use, and we've asked him to use specifically those things he mentioned, like 4 billion in trade deal. There are very specific things he mentioned. I don't know. I don't know where is the impasse here. I don't know if they just didn't notice the date, but it's very strange because Mr. David Lammy was like very briefed on this case when he was in opposition. But today we got his attention, and I just really wish they act fast. And I wish all of the government, like I wish also the Prime Minister acts. It's not that hard, but I feel a call from the Prime Minister, pressure, using some of the leverage Mr. David Lammy has spoken about when in opposition, even just signalling that he will just make them abide by their own laws.
So now I'm just going to pull up this statement that David Lammy gave in the Commons today. If we can just pull that up on our screen so we can have a look. The Foreign Secretary said, "I understand the strength of feeling, and that's why the Prime Minister's raised this. I have raised this on successive occasions, and we will continue to lobby." He's a dual national. We will continue to lobby on his behalf. How is Allah doing? Just briefly.
Can I quickly comment
on
that statement? Mr. David Lammy himself, when he was in opposition, he used to push back against the Tories when they kept saying, "We raise this, we always raise it," things like that. Governments can raise it like strongly, or can raise it paying lip service to it. The British government sometimes raises the human rights issues around the world for non-citizens. Raising is not quite enough. It depends on how you raise it and whether you're pushing or not, and whether you're using your leverage, whether you're raising it seriously or not. Sorry, back.
No, I'm really grateful that you've joined us here on the programme and highlighted Allah's story to us as well. Thank you very much. Well, 3 years ago, a fatal shooting on the set of film Rust shocked Hollywood. These pictures of the police response were seen across the world, and so were these pictures of actor Alec Baldwin, taken moments after he'd picked up a prop gun that turned out to be loaded with ammunition. Well, the gun went off, killing cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. The film's director, Joel Souza, was also wounded when the revolver went off. Despite it all and the high-profile trials that followed, the film went ahead and last week had its world premiere in Poland with a dedication to Halyna Hutchins. Well, the director, Joel Souza, joins us now from San Francisco. Joel, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. And I was reading some of the things that you had said. You obviously, it's been very difficult the last few years for you since the incident, since losing Halyna in this tragic incident. You also said it's changed you, and it's changed who you are as a person.
Yeah, no, it's, I think an incident like that is going to affect anybody deeply, losing a friend and being injured like that yourself. But then I think sort of all the high profile kind of hysteria that followed was very difficult to deal with. I told somebody, I woke up that morning one person, and then I woke up the next morning somebody else, and then you sort of spend the next, however long, 3-4 years of your life trying to figure out what that means.
Yeah, and as we said there in our introduction, the film has premiered. I mean, how does it feel for it to be completed, for it to have gone through this process now, and also honouring Halyna?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a big sense of relief that the movie has sort of made its debut and that people have now seen it and are talking about it. There is a sense of crossing a finish line in that regard. I think, it was very important to all of us at every stage of this that we were paying tribute to Halyna, but not only that, but also, trying to preserve every single frame that we possibly could of what she shot. And then, normally a movie, it serves one master, it serves the master of its story. But this movie needed to serve two masters. I think it needed to obviously serve its story, but then also it needed to serve the preservation of Halyna's work. So the question became for us, how do you do that? How do you craft the story in the editing room in a way that lets you preserve every single thing you possibly can of hers and still tell a story at the same time.
And I just wanted to get your reaction to the latest appeal by prosecution to restart the manslaughter case against Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, I just heard about that this morning, actually. It's interesting. I didn't have the reaction I think I necessarily thought I would. When these things happen, they tend to sort of be like a little bit of a bomb that goes off in your life. But I've tried to compartmentalize this stuff as much as I possibly can and not let it just sort of eat me alive and just take up so much space inside of me that when this happened, I thought, okay, well, that's happening now, and that'll play out however it plays out.
And Joel, I've got about 30 seconds left, but how would you like Helena remembered?
Oh, gosh. I think, I wouldn't say that we should remember her as a cinematographer and her as a person separately. She lived film. She lived it. She ate it. She breathed it. She drank it. I've never met anybody in my life that did that more so than her. She was an incredibly kind person, an incredibly talented person. She was somebody that everybody was always drawn to. She was someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's daughter. I think, she was not just a story in a scandalous incident. She was a human being that everyone who knew her really admired and loved.
Joel, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you very much for having me.
And that's all for tonight's programme. Thanks so much for watching.